Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Ali Hasnain at Hasnain Taqvi. Hello and welcome to our this next lecture on the fundamentals of grammar, and especially the area which at times tends to become confusing. See, it is very easy when you essentially decide in terms of the structure of a sentence. You know, it contains a subject always and is necessarily having a verb. Any sentence is constituted with these two structures, like subject, verb at least. Now the point is that how to use verb? Obviously with reference to the subject. This is very obvious most often. Like if I say he, she, it, or for that matter they, are the first person pronouns of subject case, I, we, your job is very easy. You seldom make a mistake in that regard. Why? Because you have the subject next to you. You can easily decide as to the right form of the verb. However, at times it's not that obvious. It becomes tricky. And our purpose today is to understand that area, to be able to use verb properly. Some examples just to make you understand as to what troubles you may encounter there. For example, you get an inverted sentence which says from behind the mountains. You use your verb here, come, and eerie, shimmering, light. Now actually, unless you locate as to where exactly is the subject, your use of verb might have a trouble there in that sentence. And in general, whenever you come across a sentence, it is your first job to decipher as to the relationship between verb and subject, because unless the verb agrees with its subject, your sentence cannot be correct. Seeing where the verb is, you ask a question in terms of who or what. What comes? You would automatically understand that it's not this thing. Even otherwise it's a preposition phrase which can never be a subject. But it might confuse. The noun mountains might make you use this word come without s or es. In this case, when you ask what comes, it's not the mountains that are coming there. It's an eerie shimmering light that is coming from behind the mountains. So it was an inverted sentence that required you to locate the subject and use verb accordingly. Obviously the right form would be comes. Then again, if you have a word such as headquarters, this might be tricky. You might not know exactly, let's say the headquarters is or are, unless you know exactly how to do it. If for example you have this subject data, again you have confusion regarding the right use of verb. Data is or data are. You may have the word politics as subject. Your verb can only rightly be used once you know that what is the exact need of this subject. Should we treat it as singular or plural? So these are the areas that we would be focusing on today's lecture. See, this is basically talking in terms of subject, verb, agreement. You would seldom find a test that doesn't have, say, 3 to 4 questions on this area alone. So it is very important to be able to know all troublesome domains. In our today's lecture, if you listen to it carefully, if you practice afterward, and if you consult, I would recommend to begin with, this particular area is given in High School English Grammar by Wren and Morton on page 12. And if you read the detail there, you would sort of refresh your memory on what to do. We proceed with this concept with reference to different domains systematically. Suppose we begin first of all with collective nouns. You know what a collective noun is. Obviously, noun or pronoun can serve as your subject. If there is a collective noun, say army or police, team, or it could be some other such as committee. It could be, let's say, there could be so many, family. These are some of the frequently used collective nouns as subject, and then you are assessed on your understanding of the right use of verb. Let's see. Any collective noun can either be used with a singular verb or with a plural verb. How? You have to decipher as to what is the concept involved. If you are talking through that collective noun about the activities of the individuals, say activities of individuals therein, then it is a singular subject and you require a singular verb. If instead you are talking about a unit or as a whole, the collective noun as a single entity. Students, our first area is collective nouns. When used as a subject, they might confuse you unless you know exactly how to treat them. We are going to learn. Some collective nouns have been mentioned here: army, police, team, committee, family. Now, you need to remember, any collective noun, when it is dealing with a single entity, like as an organization, because you know collective nouns can form groups of people or organizations. When these different organizations together, like the UN, or different people together, like team, you have to now see its implication. If that particular noun is treating the people as a single unit, as an organization, as an entity, then you require singular verb with it. If instead your collective noun is highlighting individuals from out of that collective structure, like activities of those individuals, then you require a plural verb. I'll give you an example. Let's say the team, now the subject remains the same. Your verb is to be decided with reference to the sense that is evolved through this structure. Let's see. The team, let's say, now we are talking about this unit as a whole. So the team has lost again. I should have said won again, but somehow this keeps happening. My point is that this is not being considered in terms of individuals in that particular collective unit. It's being considered as a unit. So as a unit, whenever you treat it as a single entity, it requires a singular verb. And by using this, we have done right. If instead I say the team are taking their seats. Now this structure, this plural pronoun, basically possessive adjective in this case, and this plural verb. Why? Because this is not being treated as a single unit. It instead is being visualized as activity of individuals. Thereby, it requires plural verb and plural pronoun if need be. This would be easily digested by you if you go to your frequently repeated example of the committee. You remember that sentence. The committee has given its decision. It was like that. The committee has given a unanimous decision. We have used singular verb. You can see why. Because we are not talking about individuals. The very action, unanimous, everybody is on one page. So everybody becomes insignificant. The institution becomes more important. If instead we say the committee you are familiar with this structure too. See what is happening here. We are using plural verb. Why? Because now we are not talking about the institution itself. Rather, we are talking about the individuals in that institution who have like difference of opinion. They are divided. So individuals, people who are divided. It goes the same way with all collective nouns. The family has given him his full support. Should it be like that? Or the family have given him their full support? Now, family as a unit or family as individuals? We are treating about individuals now. Thereby, have is preferable here. Your grammar usage requires it. If instead we have another subject such as his family is or large, what would you say? His family? No, that means collective unit as a whole. Singular verb needed. So his family or large would be incorrect. His family is large. You have to go like that. If I say the United Nations is an ineffective institution, is correctly used because we are talking about the institution itself. If on the other hand I say the United Nations have objected to American approach towards COVID-19. So have objected means some of them are like division. Individuals are being considered, individual countries in this case. This you need to remember. Whenever there is a usage that involves any collective noun, you have to see what sense is being developed. If it is a concrete set or a single entity, then you treat it as a singular subject, like the police is a good institution. If instead you are talking about individuals in that institution, the police are chasing the thief, because not the entire setup from Karachi to KPK is after the thieves. It's like one of the activities and some given police station, some individuals doing that job. That is the rule about right use of collective nouns. Hopefully you have understood this. We move to the next concept now, and that has to deal with, there's one thing left, let me tell you that. If you get a singular determiner before any collective noun, let's say we have family as collective noun here. Let's say every family in the neighborhood is or are Chinese. My point is, this determiner with this collective noun has made it clear for you that your verb can only be singular now, irrespective of how that collective noun is being treated in terms of individuals or in terms of a unit. That doesn't matter here. So that's an exception. Wherever you get any such structure like this team is a collective noun, this is the determiner, that is singular in nature. So this structure demands that your verb should be singular. This team has chosen its name. We cannot say there. Apparently the different individuals are doing different things. The activity is involved, but this rule is reversed. Why? Because of this determiner, which is singular, and it automatically requires a singular verb. We are now effectively done with this concept of collective nouns, and we move to the next concept. We move to another concept that has to be very clear in your minds to be able to take the right form of verb whenever making it agree with the subject, because subject has its own specific requirements in such structure. It's essentially related to correlative conjunctions. You know what correlative conjunctions are. It's like a pair that is used, such as not only, but also. There's another expression that says not, but. Then you have either, which you may pronounce as either, or neither, nor. These are called correlative conjunctions. They have their specific subject that is simple actually, and most of you might already be knowing, yet you need to refresh yourselves. See, whenever they are used, you necessarily have more than one subjects involved, apparently. Like if I say, not only my friends, but also my, let's say, foe. Invited. So subject verb agreement problem is there. Why? Because apparently you have this subject and this subject, and you have usage of this correlative conjunction. See what you need to do. Every time any correlative conjunction is used, your legitimate subject is always the one closest to the verb, and your verb has to agree with that. In this case, my foe being singular, you require a singular verb. So the sentence has to run as, not only my friends, but also my foe was invited. If instead I say, not only my foe, but also my friends. Now obviously you use verb here, and rule states that the subject nearest to the verb has to sort of adjust to the right form of verb. So my friends being plural, you would say whatever the verb structure, like it could be any be form. If it is MR, you would say or, like not only my foe, but also my friends are invited. It goes with all four areas, and at times it does sound awkward, though you have a sequence of pronouns to adhere to, but your examiner on this domain, in order to assess your understanding on the rule, may give you a sentence of the kind which says, let's say, not only, let's use some other, like either Ali or I Let's keep the sentence the same. Invited. Now you have to use be form. He would use it wrong if he is assessing you in terms of 4 sentences and only 1 sentence would have the right verb form. If instead he is assessing you on sentence completion, he would give you this verb form in terms of options: is, am, are, and be itself, maybe A, B, C, D, 4 options. And it could be like any other way he wants to assess you on structures. One single sentence to spot the error, then A, B, C, this area would also be underlined and might have been wrongly used the verb itself. So either Ali or I, you know the rule. Your verb has to come here. It simply has to agree with this preceding subject, which in this case would be am. Either Ali or I am invited. So essentially your sentence is this: either Ali, either my friends, either, that doesn't matter. Like the subject that is mentioned in the beginning, there could be even 3 subjects in such structures. It could read as either Ali or I or his cousin. And you have verb form here. Again, the rules is the same. Because this is or, your subject is this. If instead it is I and his cousin, let's read the sentence again. Either Ali or I and his cousin. Now this being joined with and becomes plural, and you use the verb as per the rule according to the nearest subject, but nearest subject being coupled up with this conjunction and becomes plural, so plural verb. Either Ali or I and his cousin are invited. Hopefully you have understood this concept. Important. Only 4 structures, if you retain in mind, becomes easy. Wherever your examiner uses this, he essentially intends to assess you on this area. Neither, let's try. I give you a sentence and you fill in with regard to the right structure. Let's say I write it here for you. Neither you nor she now let's say be form in present. Your options are is, am, are, and you have to use the right form. Neither you nor she. What would you use? Very right. Understanding that this be the subject, she is going. So you understand this. Now we move to the next segment. Dear students, like we have just done this correlative conjunctions and found out for ourselves the right subject. In the same way, there's another kind of structure that involves more than one subjects. And again, you are to pick the right subject there. Those words are, in terms of usage, you would come across words like besides or like, could be unlike, rather than, or in addition to, as well as, along with, together with, accompanied by, such structures you would come across where you would again have two subjects, and you will have to decide as to what is the right subject there. Addition, expressions of addition. I give you a sentence on this pattern to be able to understand for yourself. Ali, unlike his cousin, is, let's say, sweet. Now you have singular subjects on both ends, Ali and his cousin. I've already used this singular verb. Your problem is to know for sure whether it is this subject that has taken this verb form or instead this subject. In our correlative conjunctions, it was the subject nearest to the verb form. It's not the case here. In such structures, it is always remember, the very first subject that needs to agree, or verb needs to agree with that. So it is basically this: Ali is sweet. Now we try to make it a bit complex by saying something: Ali, unlike his friends. Now, unlike his friends doesn't alter the right use of verb. It still remains is. Ali is sweet. Why? Because the very first subject was singular. Our verb had to be singular. We can use many sentences on this pattern, like the ambassador By the way, I'm poor at spellings. Excuse my that domain. Rest assured, otherwise pretty good. The ambassador, as well as his, let's say, family. Should we use members as well for you to be confused in terms of singular or plural? Or instead we say his friends for a better understanding of the right subject. The ambassador as well as his friends, let's say invited version. And you have verb to be given here. Our rule states always the first subject. Who was invited? Basically friends were also invited, but the first subject is the ambassador. So we would say the ambassador as well as his friends was invited. You cannot say the ambassador as well as his friends were invited. It goes the same. If it is plural in the beginning, let's say friends as well as Ali, it is friends that would take the verb form. Friends as well as Ali were invited. So friends were invited. This is additional expression. Let's say I, besides, let's say you are my friend. No, this might sound queer, but it's the right use. I besides you, besides means in addition to you, am going. So essentially the sentence is I am going. This expression besides demands you to understand that this subject should never be considered while using the right form of the verb. Verb has to agree with your first subject. Wherever you come across any such structure, you have to adhere to this rule. And in your study and then again assignments and tests, you would have pretty extensive, let's say, kind of practice on this area. Hopefully you have understood this concept. We move to the next now. Dear students, this area at times confuses students. Why? Because when I say he, I would say is invited. But when I say he and she, obviously we understand this "and" to be coupling up the subject into plural structure, and we use plural verb. He and she are invited. These are the obvious cases. But with this "and," you may not have always an obvious case. There could be some not obvious or tricky version. We are to understand that now. See, when after "and" you see, let's say a, an, or the, any of the articles, you need to be watchful as to what your examiner is assessing you on. Remember, if you are dealing with the same individual, this structure should not be used with the second subject. I make a sentence here. The Qaid-e-Azam was a great leader and a great orator. Unless you are familiar with the rule, you might not be able to guess as to what has gone wrong with this sentence. You see the structure involving "and." With this "and," you have article, adjective, and a noun. And article, adjective, and a noun before it. Whereas the subject is singular, the Qaid-e-Azam. Now, this actually means you are talking about somebody else, not the same person, unless you remove this. And then again, great is used there. You don't need to repeat that. You remove that too. Your correct structure requires the Qaid-e-Azam was a great leader and orator. Let's change it in the structure of the subject. If instead I say the great leader and orator are national hero. Remember, this is the subject. After "and," you are not getting any article. You are just getting sort of noun without any qualifying or determining word. So that means this noun is adding to the understanding of that person. He is necessarily the same person. The rank of orator is that of the great leader. So our verb form has to be singular. The great leader and orator, let's say, was our national hero. Yes, you could very likely use this structure. Your examiner may assess you on that. If he uses the great leader and the great orator, now he has given you a compound subject and he may use "was" here. This would be incorrect this time round. Why? Because you are talking about two different individuals. One is the great leader, the other is the great orator. These two were our national heroes. So he may place the mistake somewhere. You are familiar with that structure again, which uses the cashier and clock is absent. So we mean to imply the clock is the cashier too. If we say the cashier and the clock, we require plural verb are absent. The poet and philosopher is dead. The poet and the philosopher are dead. So this concept is with regard to and, you have to every time be watchful as to how your examiner is assessing you on that right use of verb, subject verb agreement. Again, your subject is to be deciphered with reference to this determiner that is following after and. If there is one, you have plural subject. If there is none and just another noun, you have a singular subject, and your verb has to be according to that. Now, the same area is involved in your better understanding of those typical expressions such as, let me write some, bread and butter, time and tide, rise and fall, horse and cart. There could be so many else, so many other expressions. One I am thinking of is two and two. Since it has a different rule, I would discuss that separately. My point is that these expressions that are occurring without any article afterwards, they basically mean a single entity. Like when we talk in terms of bread and butter, this is an idiomatic expression which actually means a livelihood. Then again, time and tide, idiomatic expression as like conditions. Rise and fall is a condition. And horse and cart, it's a mode of transport. You are not talking in terms of a separate horse and a separate cart. So every time you see any idiomatic expression which highlights a single concept. Why single? Because there is no article applying the same rule. An and the separately, they are not highlighting the second subject. So that means we are dealing with the same topic and same subject, the first one. So bread and butter is difficult to earn these days. Then again, time and tide waits for none. We are not using wait for none because we are not treating this as a plural subject, despite the fact that we have and here. Why not treating it as plural? Normally we have seen it. Wherever there is and, it renders your subject plural and your verb has to be plural thereby. It is not happening here. Why? Because it's an idiomatic concept. Again, rise and fall, let's say, is witnessed by all nations. Rise and fall not in terms of a separate thing and then separate, it's the scenario, a condition, a likelihood of ultimate kind, rise and fall. Then again, horse and cart is the common mode of traveling in this town, is let's say favorite traveling mode. Let's say transport. Horse and cart is my favorite transport, as riding in that buggy, what you call in Urdu. However, remember, these very idiomatic concepts can be used in terms of separate entities. We may say bread and butter were the two things I bought from the market. Now you are talking about separate entities. You are not talking about its idiomatic concept as single entity. Time and tide waits for none, fine, because idiomatic concept. Time and tide were the two challenges the sailor had to confront. So it's basically reaching the destination in time and then confronting the challenge of tides. You are talking about two separate things. Rise and fall are the two troubles that he saw there. So when you have a numeral which is highlighting that in terms of separate subjects, or you are referring to things individually, again the pattern of collective nouns, you require a plural verb. So every time you come across any of such structures, you need to work on that, whether he is giving you idiomatic sense. If that be the case, singular verb. If instead he is giving you a literal sense, then obviously plural verb. I wrote here two and two. in literature, it has an idiomatic meanings. It means simple logic. So we treat it as singular entity. 2 and 2 makes 4. This actually means something easy to digest or understand. But in maths, Sir Nadeem would tell you, 2 and 2 are two separate numerals or figures. So plural entity it becomes. 2 and 2 make 4 in say maths, or in general too. So you are not talking in terms of its idiomatic sense, which means easy. You are talking in terms of counting. If that kind of context is evolved, where counting is involved, such entities which are joined by and could become plural. But wherever there is only this concept involved, idiomatic, and idioms are very clear, you would not mistake them with anything. Otherwise, you would easily judge as to how to use them, singular subject and thereby singular verb. We move to the next concept now. Dear students, before we move to the next concept, I would like to give you a question, and I'm sure as you pay attention and you understand things, you feel free to ask even whenever you have any problem. You would be able to crack that. It's on the pattern of getting the right verb for a structure. Let me write the sentence here. My question is to get the right form of verb in this blank. What should it be? You have and, you have two apparent subjects. Should it be singular or plural? Very good. Why? Because after and you have no article. That means captain is the same man, the coach. And this being the same requires singular subject. The coach and captain is sacked. If instead we have the coach and the captain, obviously now you need a plural verb. The coach and the captain are sacked. Good. My point next is with regard to the right use of expressions that involve one of. I keep hearing and keep seeing such expressions which say, he is one of my best teacher. Please don't do this. Remember always, your one is out of many always. He cannot be one. He has to be like plural structure it has to be. He is one of my best teachers. So every time you come across any such sentence that involves one of and then a noun, do see this. It should click in your mind that your examiner may make a mistake here by implying a singular noun. One is out of many. One of my best friends, one of my best dreams, one of my frequently visited places, one of the favorite towns, one of the best movies. So one is out of many always. Your noun has to be plural. This, if you understand, now you'll be able to understand my next debate related to this structure. He is one of my best teachers. Fine, this clause is complete, a sentence. If instead you get a sentence, he is one of my best teachers, and you get a relative clause next, who, let's say in my old students, ex-students, they are familiar with this expression, kalasha kaku. You would get to know the two. He is one of my best teachers who, let's say our verb is live. Should it be live or lives? That's the question. And some of you might be already familiar with the rule. The rule states that whenever you use any relative clause, which means who, which, that, such pronouns, excuse me, such relative pronouns, when they are used, you have to see which is its subject. Always the preceding noun that serves automatically as the subject of the relative clause. So when you have to use this verb live or lives, you have to see the noun here. Obviously, by virtue of one of, this noun is plural. This plural noun is now the subject. So if you have teachers as subject, teachers live in Kalashakaku. So who live in Kalashakaku? You cannot say who lives in Kalashakaku. He's one of my best teachers who live in Kalashakaku, because many live, he's only one of them. Now there is another structure you may extend. One of my best teachers who live, who, using this as subject, making singular verb as the right choice. One of my best teachers who live, let's say in, this time let's change Kalashakaku into Karachi. One of my best teachers who live in Karachi. This relative clause now is just identifying teachers, but you have to say something about this now. One of my best teachers who live in Karachi is, let's say, Sarali. Why have I used this singular verb here, whereas I use this plural verb instead, or rather singular verb with regard to plural? Should I call it singular? No, it is plural verb. I made a mistake there. Live, according to teachers, plural subject, the verb plural. If instead thus is being used, why? Is it with regard to teachers, or is it with regard to this one person? Actually, it is simply stating one is Sarali. One of my best teachers is Sarali. It is kind of this sentence, is one of my best teachers. One of my best teachers is Sarali. If you use a relative clause, who, that has its own rule. It would reckon preceding noun as its legitimate subject and use verb accordingly. So the sentence runs as, one of my best teachers who live in Karachi is Sarali. Your examiner may create errors anywhere. He may use here one of my best teacher. Wrong. You cannot have teachers. It has to be teachers. He may use lives here. Wrong. You cannot have lives here because plural subject. You have to use live. He may use or. You may tend to think that teachers being subject or is fine. No, because who live in Karachi, this verb has already agreed with its subject. Now this verb has to locate the subject. Who is Sarali? One of my best teachers. So one of my best teachers is Sarali. That's why singular verb here. However, there is another trouble that you might come across on such structures. I give you a sentence. He is only one of my teachers. You have this relative pronoun here, who, and you have to use verb here. Let's say over 50. You're talking in terms of an individual who is over 50. Now, the sentence is complete. He's only one of my teachers who dash over 50. Now, the choice is or are. Our rule suggests that this being the subject, it should be are. But it is incorrect. Why? Because you have used this word only here. Sense overrides structure actually. The sense demands that none else is over 50. Only one is over 50. Despite the fact that relative pronoun demands a plural verb here, you have to use singular verb by virtue of this only. You would say, he is only one of my teachers who is over 50. If you say who are over 50, how can he be the only one? Because then you are implying that there are more than one, whereas the sense demands one individual. So by virtue of that sense, you violate this rule and you use singular verb is, and your sentence becomes correct. So let's repeat. Basically, one is out of many. When this structure gets a relative pronoun, you simply have to see its preceding noun wherever there is a relative pronoun. It automatically, like this is the book which I lost, which I am reading, let's say. Instead, let me use verb immediately after that relative pronoun. This is the book which is good. Now, if instead I say, these are the books which, obviously books being the subject, you would use plural next, because which is relative pronoun and preceding noun becomes plural. These are the books which are good. So our second rule says relative pronoun, and you simply have to see the noun preceding it. However, you must see that if after relative pronoun you have to use another clause with this structure or complete the clause, first clause, one of my best teachers, the sentence is not complete. Why? Because indefinite pronoun, preposition, possessive adjective, again best adjective, teacher's noun. To this point there is no verb. There being no verb, you don't have a clause yet. Subject verb agreement says that every sentence necessarily has a subject and a verb. So how would you complete it? By saying is thoroughly. One of my best teachers is thoroughly. So our second rule said that relative pronoun obviously takes preceding noun as subject, and if there is the clause to be completed, next it has to consider the right subject actually. However, the exception here, that when you have in such sentences the word only, then this relative pronoun should not consider the preceding noun as its subject, rather only demands that it should always be a singular verb. Hopefully you have understood this too. Let's move to the next concept on this subject verb agreement.